Hello, beautiful friends. Welcome back to, I think we're on day 7 of our daily December embodiment challenge series. Space that I'm coming into connection doing one embodiment video every day for the entire month of December. I think I'm going to do like a 30-day challenge, and then on the 31st day, we'll do a closing ceremony of sorts. I have been working through different exercises from Leah Guzman's book, Essential Art Therapy Exercises, as a way for me to feel like I'm held as I share what I'm sharing, which is often a very vulnerable experience of practicing embodied creative channeling. And so, with that, I am going to take a sip of my tea today. I have lavender chamomile to just sort of calm myself. And I read some of my pages from this morning's journal on my other project, Pages in Process, which started as a place to help me source and sort through what I needed to in order to hopefully build resiliency enough to come into connection here with you guys for self-care for performers. Because it's scary to be seen. It's scary to show up and share. And I think there's sort of a distillation process that I've found in the work that I do with self-care for performers that is really a lot about like, let's get to the nugget, the core, the piece of the unmet needs of the human who decides to be a performing artist. And then the performing artist who is navigating the waters, the seas of performance culture, and which can be just objectively stressful and challenging. And I've said this before, but so often we are traumatized people telling stories about trauma and just bumping up against each other's triggers, and all sorts of things can happen in our practices creatively, in our training, and then also in our careers. And when we are just like how parents can break cycles with how they raise their children, to not perpetuate any potentially harmful patterns that they inherited from their parents, and the generations prior that had, or that had either lived through war or famine or abuse or neglect, and maybe perpetuated a lot or some of the nervous system experiences of that. And also, I know many people, it's not like war and famine have gone away. They still exist. And many performing artists have different backgrounds, different histories, different lives. Some come from having experiences that are very extreme in that capacity as well as the more complex trauma component of little things over time, whether that is whether that, however that happens culturally, and that can happen in a lot of different ways, through microaggressions or through big incidences, or through just hearing a narrative about who the world thinks you should be, or who you are, or how you're supposed to show up. And again, this can take so many different forms, and there are so many different kinds of bodies in my community. And I find it sometimes challenging to figure out how to talk to all of you at the same time, because it's so diverse. And I think that something that I've worried about in my own creative recovery is, how do I keep an inclusive experience of others while I'm speaking, and also not erase myself in the process in order to be so broad. But if I'm so broad, I must be including myself. Yet, can we be so broad that we actually start to lack potency? These are questions I don't have the answer to. These are things that I'm curious about. These are conversations I think a lot of us, at least in my communities of artists and educators, that that are like, we're curious and we're interested in having these conversations. And also some of us have been impacted very directly in big ways by some of these things that we're now bringing to the table. And so there's a bit of like a triggered and traumatic, like expressive component that may need or want to come out and forward. And there are many of us who also, in whatever capacity, weren't experiencing something in the same way. And so to see or to hear about how that is happening or has happened or continues to happen, and how we may or may not be a part of that experience of someone else's felt sense of harm, it's challenging. It's all a challenge, and I don't want to diminish that. And I also want to keep coming back into a way where we can feel held for a moment, even if it's just for a moment, held for a moment in an exercise, held for a moment in a practice, held for a moment in a ritual and an experience of like the ceremony of the soul, the place where the deepest, most inner part of oneself feels like there's safety enough to come into connection from the inside into the outside expressivity of practice, whatever that practice is. And I think a lot of us come into the performing arts because we're trying to work through something, whether we know it consciously or whether it's a subconscious kind of reflex. But there might be a part of our persona or an inner part of us that we might have an easier time embodying and integrating into the expression of who we are if we have the safety and the containment of a character, of a role, of someone else's words, someone else's choreography, or even our own, that's representational and archetypal and distant enough to where we can share it a little bit removed. And it's also a vulnerable practice. So a lot of self-care for performers is, how do we stay vulnerable and protect ourselves along the way? How do we foster safe spaces where it can be safe to try and fail and be encouraged to practice from a place of not needing to aim for perfectionism or try to get things right or feel like we're going to disappoint ourselves or our partners or our whoever if we freeze in the experience. And a lot of us have a kind of performance paralysis that we go through, whether that's freezing on stage, whether that's going up online, whether that's forgetting your choreography, whether that's perpetually getting sick before you actually have to show up to a project and then never actually being able to complete a project. Some of us aren't even able to get to the point where we get there to begin with because our body shuts down prior because it senses some sort of threat. And the threat can be a threat of not belonging, a threat of not being good enough, a threat of not having the stamina or the capacity to show up in the way that you feel you're going to be expected to show up. And some of that is in my opinion, a problem of the culture of the performing arts, and something that I would like to continue to deconstruct and see if there are different ways that we can approach communication and conversations around how we make and present work. And I'm sure a lot of people are already doing that. And I think that's so wonderful. And I'm sure there are also probably places and spaces that have been doing that for a very long time. And oh my gosh, how wonderful. And I would love to, if you're someone who has access or resources to that and are interested in coming into connection to chat about that, I would love to hear from you. And if this is a newer possibility to you, I'm so excited to be inviting you into this conversation and into this curiosity and inquiry with me. Yay. And us as a community, as to be conscious of the culture that we are both already in the seas of, and also that we very intentionally foster between ourselves and how we meet the world at large, and the aspects and parts of the creative cultural landscape that we choose to meet, that we have more choice and agency around how we make connections. This is something I want to keep talking about. Okay. And for today, we're going to hold ourselves in a container. And I have a little bit of time before I have to run off to another thing. So I should be fine because it's been taking me between like 25 minutes and like 50 minutes for each of these sessions that we're doing so far. And today's, we're going to do something that I'm hoping will be a nice, smooth, and connective practice. I need more and more things that are going to help me cope and make decisions. I get decision fatigue and then overwhelm a lot because of fear of not getting things right and having a history of feeling like every choice I make would be make or break, or every choice I make would be wrong. And so I felt like I wasn't able to make a choice for reasons I don't need to go into right now, but maybe you feel that way too for reasons we don't need to go into right now, but it might be there for you. And while it's lovely to know those reasons, it can be very helpful. It also isn't always needed to heal the pattern or patterns that you want to change. Sometimes just being with the experience of the felt sensations, we don't have to go into story so much. We don't have to go into like mental meaning processing as much as certain kinds of modalities will ask of one to do. And sometimes when we go about things that way, we can find ourselves ever sifting through like the weeds and the wounds of our traumas, right? And I'm not saying that that's not an important thing to do. And it's also, I think, for our own nervous systems and from a somatic space and base, really important that we don't do too much too soon, too fast of that, because that's what trauma is, something that's too much, too soon, too fast for the body to integrate and feel safe with. And then we get stuck in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, shut down, all of that stuff. So finding ways to titrate, so like move back and forth between the discomfort kind of edge and then back to safety. In tantric practices, this is often referred to as going to your edge, or meeting your edge and stretching from there. And it can be a really good thing to do that, but we don't want to blow past it to the point where we we create a new experience of something that our system registers as traumatic, which I am learning more and more about. And I think that as a performing arts educator, it's important that we are trauma aware, yes, but also trauma informed, like you understand it. And then hopefully also trauma responsive, meaning that you have the ability to respond to the content that comes up, because we deal with really oftentimes intense content. I think it is, I think it's now that we have the awareness and the tools societally and that's out there to understand more how to be aware of the nuances and needs of the body, we can start to shift and change the way we connect in our training and also our professional settings, so that we can meet ourselves from a place of like, oh, I'm dysregulated right now, and I either can still connect enough in my window of tolerance to be like, okay, I'm riding the waves of stress and I can get through without losing myself, or I'm at an edge and I don't know that I can hold the edge. I might actually find myself way out there, lost at sea, and have a hard time coming back from whatever experience I have. That can look like being in a character that has a really intense feeling or emotional journey and not being able to shake it. And sometimes I've had experiences of this, and I've also had friends express they've had experience of this. We actually have like flashbacks of character experiences, and that aren't our own, but a place that we've gone in character, and then that comes up in our dreams, in our intrusive thoughts, in our way of not being able to feel safe again in our lives, or reoriented to the like our own personal identity. Sometimes there's like an enmeshment that happens there. So I think it's also, I find that ritual can be really helpful to practice. How do we come into connection with something, and how do we leave it changed, and how do we choose what we're going to leave behind, and how do we choose what we're going to bring with us forward? I think that working with character and character essences in a way where there's a spiritual practice and component to it, where you are in relationship with the character that you're playing, where you are in relationship as a sort of ritual embodied expressivity, and that there is a consensual connection between you and character essence, between your essence and character essence, and then any necessary boundaries are put in place, and then there is like a ceremonial release that also happens. So these are things that I teach, these are things that I talk about, these are things that I've also been scared to share super publicly, for various reasons, again, that I don't need to go all the way into right here right now, but these things are threaded throughout in pieces of the work I talk about, and my recovery from certain societal paradigms. Okay, so continuing, we are going to do this exercise today called Safe Place Imagery. The benefits are it relieves anxiety and increases coping and decision-making skills. Exercise time, an hour. Materials, a camera. So for this practice, as it's written in the book, which is going to be, again, different than how I'm translating it to an embodiment practice today, you can do either. And if you would like the printout of every day's practice, you can join the Self-Care Garden, or also I'll link down in the description if you want to just purchase this wonderful book that I've been using thus far for your own leisure and to have, then that's down there as well. Okay. PTSD results from surviving a traumatic event. Threatening experiences like war, abuse, or neglect leave traces that get stuck in our memories, emotions, and bodily experiences. When triggered, PTSD causes symptoms such as re-experiencing the trauma, feelings of panic or anxiety, touchiness or reactivity, memory lapses, and numbness or dissociation. Creating a safe place through imagery can help relieve the symptoms of anxiety related to PTSD. Look for spaces and places to photograph that feel safe for you. Be open to creating your own space if needed. Photo subjects may include a friend, a yoga studio, or a quiet space in a room. Steps. Use your camera and take photos of places that feel safe for you. 2, challenge yourself to create several safe place images. So I'm just going to write, I'm going to embody. I'm going to start in the chair. I'm going to start in the chair, and I'm going to be my safe space here. And then maybe I'll be one up standing, and we'll just see what comes out. I have up to 20 minutes that I can do this for. So we'll try to do that in under that amount of time. Okay, before I head off to my next connection. Okay, I am now my safe space. I just want to smile. Whew. It's like, oh, and as I smile, I feel this like tingliness underneath, this like awareness that, wow, I don't always feel safe enough to smile. Ooh, that brought up some things. Like having a safe space to smile, having a safe space to feel like I'm surrendered and smiling. Not that I'm guarded and smiling, but surrendered, and like the smile is also inward. Now I want to stand up. I don't know, safe space to smile, an internal safe space to smile. Here we go. Okay. I am now my safe space. I'm gonna move my chair. And this is a safe space for me. The space I'm in right here, right now. My apartment. I love it here. I think it's great. I think that more and more I want to feel like I can extend this space past my apartment. And I want my safe space to be my life. I want my life to be my safe space. I recognize that it's like here's a safe space picture. Here's a safe space picture. And so that's sort of like with the exercise, that's the exercise, to take pictures of places that are safe spaces. So the safe spaces that I see in my life are my couch, my bathtub, my bed, my chair. I'm learning how to have a safe space here with you, and what kind of conversations and practices that I want and need to cultivate in order to have that. I am realizing I'm like very much right here, and it's very image based, I think, because it's like the exercises for camera is a camera exercise, but I also want to do the like embodied embodiment. So I'm going to say I am now experiencing, my life as a safe space. I just want to lie down. I always want to go to the floor. I always want to just rest a while. I have pillows everywhere, so they can always catch me. And I just want to, like, if my life is a safe space, then I just want to feel the floor of it. I want to feel the floor of my life. So I'm just going to stay here till this changes or shifts and really feel my body surrender. I feel like I can see the blue sky and like the white clouds outside in a really beautiful way right now. And I don't think I would be able to take that in if I wasn't feeling the floor the way I'm feeling it now, and like feeling a connection to gravity. Like that gravity feels safe to me. It feels safe to be at the basin of my life. That I don't need to like rush to grow from here. Like, if this is the metaphor of like being a seed planted in the earth, like it's not a race to get out of the soil. It's like, take my time, be here. So that's what I'm doing. It's what I'm doing with you here. It's what I'm doing in my life in general. Like, I'm really into surrender cycles and liminal space, and like not trying to get anywhere, but also like knowing that like inevitably the growth is going to happen. Inevitably the seed is going to grow into what it's a seed for. I don't have to guess that that's going to happen. I also don't have to like push myself to make it happen. And also, I know that like certain environments are going to be more amenable to natural growth than others, which is, I think, the space of it all, the space as being safe is what it feels like to me. Like, if my life is safe, then I'm in the environment that's going to lead to my growth. If I'm in safe space, I'm naturally going to expand and grow and shed and evolve and flourish. You don't have to try so hard. And I'm just going to stay here for a while longer because it feels so good. And I want to invite you to also find a place that feels comfortable to you. And be with it. A place where you don't feel like you have to try so hard, but that the environment itself is nourishing and leading to growth organically, naturally, as a part of the process of life. Life and death. And that death, or the before life, doesn't have to be so scary if we really have a good relationship with it. How beautiful it can be to meet ourselves and one another in the threshold between the here and the now, between the past and the present, between the breath of the moment and the future the visions hold, our possibilities connect to. Oh, and that felt so good to say. Visions hold, possibilities connect to. From here, it's like, oh, like, what if that could be laying on the grass, looking at the sky? I'm remembering I was looking out my window a moment ago and seeing like the blue sky and the clouds, and I'm just feeling like, when you lay on the grass and you just look at the shape of the clouds and you let them take form and you just watch them as they evolve. Like, what if that's how simple and easy life and creative energies could be? That we do that with our curiosities and creative practice, that we do that with our own inner emotional states and potential for expressivity, that we just live a little bit more poetically and easefully and joyfully and relaxedly. That feels good. I feel like I could just lay here forever and go to sleep. But I know I have another meeting, and I think that's like the medicine needed. So, time is it? Yeah. I still have a little time to say goodbye to you, maybe do the follow-up questions and then take off. So, were there any similarities in the images you chose? The images I chose were just like, safe space imagery, relaxation, being able to go inside, being able to let that surrender, let that ease of spirit allow for there to be safe space externally. And the external safe space also allowed for the internal experience of safety. And there is a like natural symbiosis that can happen where like there's nothing wrong with being symbiotic. Like symbiosis is a lovely thing. It helps us regulate our nervous systems by co-regulating with something that might be regulated or regulating. So finding those safe spaces to do that in. And so I'm curious for you, what are some safe spaces that you already have in your life that you can kind of flag or mark or note that are safe for you? And or what imaginary landscape or memory or experience of quality or qualities would you like to foster that would feel like safety to you? And this actually, as an exercise that I did for myself, was I created pages and process as a practice that came from something I was doing on my own personal Instagram platform. Yet I realized I didn't feel comfortable with my community, and I didn't feel comfortable with sharing what was real and honest from me coming up and out from the sort of aesthetic of my space. It didn't feel, the imagery of my space didn't feel like a safe space to me in my own profile. And so I realized that in order for me to continue that particular practice, which I did really value, people were saying that they really liked it, but I think part of maybe what they liked was that I didn't feel quite safe and I was showing up anyways. And I don't want any more of that. I want to be with others who want me to feel safe, who want to feel safe, and that we're not pushing each other to push past our safety zones, and having this sort of like, I mean, it's not to the extent that things can get, but there is like a subtlety of like kind of like a little bit of like I'm not going to say it. I was going to say it. I'm not going to say it. But there's just this a little bit of like a wanting to see someone in challenge that can, we'll put it this way, that can be very satisfying, can be a kind of cathartic experience. That is often what we also watch in the performing arts, a journey of a character go from one experience to another to transcend something, one place into another place. And I'm finding that for me to be able to show up into practices that might do that intentionally, I also need to foster a safe enough space in my own sort of sacred container of self with my own practices, which I have, and also in how I share with the world. I'm finding that how I see myself has to register as safety for me, like my avatar, so to speak, of who I am out in the world. Because after 150 people, I've said this before too in different places, but after 150 people, we can't have like actual connections with people. We sort of become like, we can't have real connections with more than that many people. So you start to become a sort of facade or archetype of yourself. And and through authentic marketing and branding or strategic marketing skills, what one does is, or what one can do, you don't have to do it this way. What one can do is to choose consciously over and over to come into core values, to come into a choice point of like who you are, what you stand for, who you stand with. How do the colors that you tend to utilize help feel and feed that quality that you're wanting to be with? How do the words that you express match that? And I found for me, and you, again, you may or may not feel this way, but I really struggled with feeling like a lot of how I was asked to present myself as a performing artist, like what I would need for headshots that would get me work, what I would need for to put on my resume in order to like show people that I have this a certain kind of training that they also want to see in order to call me into a room. I just wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in it. It didn't feel like something that was authentic or interesting to me. It didn't feel like a match card to my core values and authentic practices. And I've struggled with feeling a disconnect and in between how I want to present myself, how I do feel most authentically me, but also how I enjoy seeing myself. That helps me feel like I have a place of like self-confidence, and that like I feel like my image is a representation of like the me that I like to be, as opposed to all sorts of other kinds of stuff. And we can maybe, oh, okay, it's time for me to go. We can maybe unpack that more at a later date. Second question, real fast. If you were able to be in one of these images, where would you be most comfortable? I loved laying on my back, looking up at the clouds. That moment to me was my favorite. What was yours? How can you create more safe spaces in your environment? Oh my gosh, that's like all I do is create safe spaces in my environment. And what I'm doing and in the process of is creating more safe spaces in my online presence, in my creative relationships, which is what we're doing here today. So thank you for joining me. I am going to run. If you'd like to join me on the self-care garden, I would love to have you there as a patron. And if you'd like to connect one-on-one, let me know. If you are not sure if you want to connect one-on-one and want to just connect and like have like a 30-minute chat about who you are, what you're looking for, what your needs are, and have me ask you some questions about what might feel most supportive to you, whether or not that's me or whether or not that's something else or someone else that might feel like more well suited to you. You fill out like a clarity call application, and like you don't have to choose to work with me to come to a clarity call. It doesn't have to be a sales call. And also I'll ask you some questions about yourself, what you're looking for, and then if there are resources that are not me that seem like they'd be a better match, I will give those and offer those to you if I have them available to in my resources and toolkit. um, and or if you want to ask me questions about what it is that I offer and how we might be able to work together, that space is available to you as well, just as a like a free connection call. So I hope to connect with you, and whether that is more here down in the comments, on Instagram, on Facebook, or in the Patreon, or even in a one-on-one connection, I look forward to cycling with you more. And thank you for taking the time to be with yourself and to be with me for today's practice. And I will see you tomorrow for the next day of Daily December Embodiment Challenge.